Cyril, I want to come to the why. And actually, maybe you can help us dig a little bit deeper into what is the problem? What is the big problem that we're not seeing when it comes to the fashion industry and sustainability specifically?
So I'm going to highlight two problems. One of them is people and the other is planet. So pretty much when it comes to the fashion industry, it's either the clothing that we're wearing is either made at the exploitation of people or at the exploitation of the planet.
Hello, 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 everybody. This show has been created to inspire you to take action,
Celebrating and reframing what success looks like.
to be the best version of ourselves that we can be.
And we have incredible speakers for you tonight.
Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to the Future Females Show. We are very excited to have you with us tonight. Woo!
We are your hosts. I'm Lauren Dallas, and this is Susana Kennedy. And this show is all about celebrating and reframing success. And the people, because we have our very first male speaker of the Future Female Show with us today, the people that are changing the game in their industries.
And we are so excited to have you here. Cyril Naicker, I've known this human being for a while now, and he is wonderful. I really, really love him to bits and pieces. He is a fashion activist. If you don't know what that is yet, you will learn in a little bit. He has been involved in all areas of the fashion industry and is now he is the representative for the fashion revolution in South Africa, along with a whole lot of other amazing titles that he holds. But tonight we will be celebrating not only what Cyril knows, but also all that the fashion industry, accolades to the fashion revolution, because it's such an important thing. I don't know if you guys know, but the fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world. Do you guys know that? Second most polluting industry in the world, but it also causes a whole lot of other problems. So Cyril, welcome, 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 our fashion revolutionary, Cyril Naicker!
Welcome!
Hi, Susanna, and hi, Lauren. Very good to meet you guys, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely a pleasure. I think that you can do more justice to your introduction than I can, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Cyril.
Sure. So I do three things, but I literally studied fashion design and came to Cape Town to work for a large retailer, and I worked as a buyer for a few years for this particular retailer. And it was at this time that I realized that our systems were flawed because, we were producing in China and, we were basically glorified copy artists. And that's not something that I wanted to do. So I decided that I needed to make a difference, and so I resigned, and with that came a restraint of trade for 2 years. And I had to move into a different industry, and I went into the events industry. But I did realize that if I ever got back into fashion, it would be on my terms, which was social justice and activism, really. So, but to come back to the question, Fashion Revolution Country Coordinator for South Africa. And then we have a family business, which is called Imprint Luxury, which is marketing and PR. And we focus there on marketing and events across the board. And then I'm the Sustainability Executive for Plain Tiger, which is an e-commerce platform. They're all related to each other. So while it may seem that it's crazy busy, which it is, I kind of tend to get involved in projects that are fashion related, that are sustainably driven, and try to do the best that I can within those industries.
Amazing.
How amazing.
Woohoo! We have to celebrate all
That is
of
like
that.
a big hell yeah, right?
Yeah. Cyril, I want to come to the why. And actually, maybe you can help us dig a little bit deeper into what is the problem? What is the big problem that we're not seeing when it comes to the fashion industry and sustainability specifically?
So I'm going to highlight two problems. One of them is people, and the other is planet. So pretty much when it comes to the fashion industry, it's either the clothing that we're wearing is either made at the exploitation of people or at the exploitation of the planet. So Susanna, just to come back to that stat, recent research has shown that fashion is not the second largest because fashion is between 2% and 8% of the global emissions, carbon emissions in the world. So while we may not be the second or the third, possibly even the fifth, there's no reason to be complacent because we are contributing towards the climate change. So sorry, you.
No. I was just going to say, have we done better? Has that statistic changed?
I would love to say that we have, but we haven't. So we've got to do better. So to come back to the question in terms of what is really the fault, it's really, Fashion Revolution has a hashtag called "Who Made My Clothes," and basically what we try to do with that is we try to highlight the people behind the clothes. Which I saw recently was Valentino's couture show, and what was quite nice, at the end of the show, they had all the ateliers come out and people that make the garments. So that is actually what we are really fighting for, is policy and advocacy in the people that make our clothes and also our planet.
So I think that that's an important thing to just go into. What is the fashion revolution? How did it start? Why is it a body that is in being?
Sure. So Fashion Revolution started in 2013. It started by two women. So it was Osala de Castro and Carrie Summers.
We have to celebrate that quickly.
For sure. And basically it happened from the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh. And Rana Plaza was a factory that housed many CMTs. And the people that were working inside were working under poor conditions. So when I talk about poor conditions, I'm talking about no breaks. I'm talking about cables hanging from the ceiling. I'm talking about bad infrastructure. And there was a fire that broke out and killed just over 2,000 people. And what happened was people were stampeding over each other. And then, it killed over 1,000 people, and over 2,000 were badly injured. That was the largest catastrophe in the fashion industry. And two women, Carrie and Osala, sort of said this should never happen on their watch in the fashion industry. So they started Fashion Revolution, which is an activism NGO really. And what we do is we really we advocate for policy. So we're not popular with government and not popular with unions and stuff, but that is really what we have to do. We're in 90 countries globally, and that's pretty impressive. And I don't get to do this by myself. I run this with a team of incredible people.
Wow. And I just want to ask, and we will celebrate this in just a second, but policy, I think, is a very broad word. What are we really talking about? What is the policy that's causing the problem?
Okay, so to answer that question, just so that everybody could understand, what I will highlight is something called a transparency index. Okay. So policy goes back to your value chain. So in just the garment that you're wearing or the jacket that I'm wearing, there are various different stages for this jacket to be made. So from the fiber, in terms of where's that fiber farmed, where's it made, to the production, in terms of the factory, to the dye houses, in terms of print and dyes that go into stuff. So across the value chain, we look at various different things. And then when it comes to sort of going deeper into it, it's kind of like, what are the rules and what are the regulations around that? So for instance, it's a known fact that if you want to look at what the color trend for the new year is, in China, look at the rivers. Okay, because the rivers running in China would be that color trend. So we know that Very Peri was the color trend for this year. So which means that purple was running all through the rivers in China. Now let's bring that a little bit back closer to home. It means that kids are playing in that water. They are getting sick. And it means fish are swimming in that water. And guess what? We're eating that fish. So, its entire ecosystem. And the entire ecosystem is flawed. And this is why legislation and policy across the value chain is vital.
And here I thought it was Pantone. I'm going to the paint samples.
But I think that, what you're pointing at there is something a really massive problem that a lot of people are just unaware of. They think that wearing their clothes doesn't affect anything beyond the shop that they bought their clothes from, but it actually affects every single level of life on this planet. Another thing that I think that we should speak about around the chain, the production chain, is that obviously the impact of transport on the planet. But in South Africa, for instance, where we always, well, you know me, I'm always supporting wear local, absolutely. As much as possible. But there is a huge problem in gaining the right fabric and the right machinery in South Africa to actually manufacture. How do we get around those problems?
These are huge problems, and I would hate to say that I have the solutions right now because, again, it's government legislation where we had, when I was studying fashion, and this is 24 years ago, we had thriving industries in Durban, thriving industries in the Western Cape. In fact, the Western Cape was one of the largest clothing industries, in South Africa, and then we kind of moved a lot of stuff offshore, and which meant that fabrics were not available here anymore, and we started to import. There's a around 40% import duty tax that on clothing that lands in this country. So which means that, I don't know if you've always, when you travel, clothing is cheaper abroad. Why is that? Because there's the less duty tax on that garment. So we need to have fabric molds resurfaced in South Africa again. We need to be producing. There's a huge talk around getting hemp done in South Africa. There's a huge talk about cotton. But the issues with that also is water. And, we almost, hit day zero in Cape Town.
Yeah.
And, the Eastern Cape is kind of heading to day zero pretty soon with water restrictions. So, we have all of these, issues, but like the previous speaker, when it comes to energy and solar power and all of that stuff, there are solutions. Just an example, one of the things Procter & Gamble, when we were hitting day zero, came up with hair care for women and men that didn't require water. So there was a solution. So even with garments, with fabric, there are solutions, and people are working hard to get these done.
Hard to get them. I actually often think that when we are faced with these challenges, that the universe, God, Allah, Buddha, Krishna, whatever you believe in, that the universe is saying to us, hello, can you pay attention? Find a solution because you guys are behaving badly, so come up with something that is kinder to the planet that I've given you to live on. So I agree with you. There's always a solution, and humans are so resourceful and so clever, and really,
and
we
entrepreneurs
really
in
are,
particular.
yeah.
Like everyone probably tuned in. But I mean, what you're sharing, it really resonates with me because before Future Females, I actually ran an online store that sold swimwear. And when I moved from Australia to South Africa, I wanted to keep the business going. And I was drop shipping from China. And as you were saying, the import duties just made it, I couldn't operate. And so then I tried to source people locally, and I could source the people actually, but I couldn't source the materials. And so I ended up having to shut this business down, even though it had been successful overseas, and I guess because of circumstance. So I know we were saying entrepreneurs were savvy people, and we're trying to solve problems, but what are some of the solutions to this? And do you see maybe something I think is that founders in this country in particular have a dual responsibility. You have to be an activist as well as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I think, Lauren, that's a great question because you cannot do business alone. You've got to collaborate. So I think that's a big thing, and I think that's a huge thing for South Africans to take home. In the sense that, no man is an island. And, I guess we've got to look to nature. Wolves hunt in a pack. And that's the best kind of analogy. And human beings have got to learn to work together. So, for instance, coming back to the swimwear scenario, there's a lot of interesting fabrics that are coming up in South Africa, from whether it's recycled plastic bottles, although that's not a solution.
But have they started making that fabric here now? Because I've been waiting for that fabric.
Yes. So I was in a meeting last week, and I can tell you that there's huge talks of a factory possibly starting to convert.
Woo, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
Because also satin pillowcases, girls, for the curls, right? Satin pillowcases are one of the best things for your hair, for keeping it nice and fancy. But the best satin is actually made from recycled plastic. It's really a fantastic satin, and that is one of the possible solutions to help out.
But I think it would be a miss for me not to address the issue with plastic. There's a lot of microfibers in that. So which means that even if a T-shirt is made from 6 plastic bottles, it means that when it goes into a wash cycle in your washing machine, there are microparticles that then end up in the ocean. So this affects fish, penguins, etc., etc. So I think while it's great because we do need to clean up the oceans and we do need to take those plastic bottles and use it for making fabric, we've got to also do our due diligence in terms of that entire cycle. What does that look like? How do we clean that? And we can't go and reinvent washing machines now to cater for this, but we can do things that are clever, and we can look at the entire process in terms of making it better, in terms of washing and care labels, etc.
So what are the most sustainable fabrics that we can buy? Because also one of the things that I really learned from you and Fashion Revolution is to actually look at my labels before I buy something and see what the fabric is. So what should I be looking out for as a consumer?
Well, thanks for that, because the first thing we teach with Fashion Revolution is look at the care label. The care label is the DNA of your garment, and it'll invariably show you the product of origin. And if you look at a garment in South Africa, invariably it's going to say made in South Africa, but from imported fabrics. Okay, because we just don't have the fabrication. So I would say look at the care labels, and Susana, I know you've always been pushing local, so I would say support local designers because it keeps jobs going, and that is important. But I know that not everybody can afford local, so people look at mainstream and what we call fast fashion, which is retail stores. So if you have to look at retail stores, look at the retail stores that are doing good business. Follow the journey, get onto their website. It is law and legislation that they should be documenting their good business journey. So they should be telling you where the garments are made, by whom it is made, in which countries they're sourcing from. In terms of what is the most sustainable garment, it's the clothing that's already in our cupboards. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard people say, I've got to go somewhere, but I've got nothing new to wear. But they have a closet full of clothing. Okay, so just to encourage everybody to first shop wisely. So if you're going shopping, edit your wardrobe. Look at what you actually need. Do you need a 7th pair of jeans? Probably not. Do you need a 7th kaftan? I don't know.
But if you need that 7th pair of jeans or the 7th jacket, you can also shop Preloved.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a huge movement at the moment, which I really, really support, is looking at there's so many different platforms now that have been created with pre-loved items. And I say pre-loved because we always used to say second-hand, and it makes it sound really crap, But pre-loved, like there are items of clothing that I have that I loved for a long time, but then, somebody else can love them.
Pre-loved or renting.
Yes, or renting as well, absolutely.
And I think renting is good for weddings and special events, because if you're only going to wear that garment once and never again, I would say please look at the renting model. But Preloved, 100%, and there are local companies doing it here.
Absolutely. So I saw that in 2021 you launched a Sustainability Accelerator for entrepreneurs. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Who is it for? What are some of the fundamentals that you're teaching?
For sure. So like this conversation that we're having, we found that a lot of business owners that have established fashion brands and companies didn't quite really understand what sustainability involved. So I came up with a curriculum, basically had 7 different lessons on that. And it's by Plain Tiger. They initiated the whole drive of an accelerator. And what happened with that accelerator is we launched it in 2021. And we've taken just over 20 brands that have gone through the accelerator, 10 in each cohort. And what we do is we teach them things from basic things to finances, to how to work with communities sustainably, garment construction, understanding fabrication, and really the business side of sustainability. And the intention there is that once they get to understand that, they then are able to offer a business that's much more sustainable on a sort of a global platform. And what was quite nice about this particular one, because TFG has also sponsored some brands, they've also been hiring from the people that have gone through the course. And they've been looking at designers to come and do stuff, whether it's swimwear in a department for sports scene, as an example. So, very interesting things are developing. And it's all about, sort of technology and advancing people in their industries.
Amazing. And just touching on something you just said, the business model of sustainability, if we can just dig a little more into that. I think it's often the case that the more sustainable and the more local sourcing you do, it can also be more expensive. sometimes as the entrepreneur. And so that is a consideration.
Yeah, is that one of the biggest barriers to entry?
And is there a profit upside for a sustainable brand?
There certainly is. So there were a few parts to that question. So let me.
We're so excited to get these answers.
Let me answer that in terms of cost factors. So it's, going sustainable certainly is much more costly. Reason being, fabrication costs a lot. So if it's an emerging designer and there are some designers in the crowd that want to bring in fabrics, it's impossible to bring a small run without paying a lot of money. So that becomes a problem. However, if we had a sustainable manufacturer locally, it would solve the problem. Then we have the issue of tax, which we've spoken about. That adds on. But then I think in terms of the upcycle to, is it sustainable? We've got to look at future. And, this is called future females. And we've got to look at the potential of going forward. Sustainability is not something that we can ignore. So if we care about, future businesses and in terms of, longevity, we've got to do things the right way. And it always, I guess, here's an example. If you want to cook a good meal, you're going to buy good ingredients. You're not going to buy, sort of secondhand rubbish. You want to get the good stuff. And I think when it comes to, clothing, it should be good fabrication. It should be good factories. It should, there should be no slavery. There should be no child labor. All of those things. So, it really needs to be clean, green businesses. And that does, unfortunately, at this point in time, come at a cost. But I am an eternal optimist, and I hope that in a few years it would be the norm, and it wouldn't be so costly.
Yeah, I think you touched on something there that we did touch on earlier on, but we didn't really delve into, is part of being a conscious consumer is not only about looking at the label to see what the fabric is made out of, but who actually really made the clothes and what kind of conditions they were working in. In South Africa, do we have factories, do we have good legislation in terms of the factories that people work at here in this country?
Absolutely. I think one of the we hear a lot of negative things about South Africa, and I think when it comes to the clothing industry, I'm so proud to say that we are doing things right. We have, one of the good things that we do is we have a good union, SACTU, and we have the bargaining council. These two operate together. And what they do in the clothing sector is to make sure that people are paid minimum fair wage, but I have to also differentiate. There's a difference between minimum fair wage and a living wage. Okay, and the owners of companies need to understand what a living wage is, and we've heard just now what petrol prices are going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a difference between living wage and minimum wage. Then we have policymakers, government that sort of advocate for job creation in the clothing sector, and this is important. And from everything that I wear, I tend to visit the factories, and I tend to visit companies locally here in Cape Town, and there are brands that will not buy anything imported; they will buy everything that's made locally, and that is great. So, and yes, it does come at a cost, but I understand the value of that as well. Yeah. So, I think it's important. And I think the other important thing, for this economy, I'm not saying that import-export we should be doing away with because it's important for our economy. But what I'm saying is that services drive economy. We live in a country where youth are most of our population. Most of the youth are unemployed. Okay, so we need to be upskilling them in a trade that they can learn and that they can get into. And unfortunately, because we've had a lot of job cuts and factory closures, the youth are not interested in working in fashion industry because they've seen their parents being put off work. So one of the big things we need to do from a PR perspective is we've got to make the fashion industry sexy again. We've got to make it so not just from sort of designers, but also from tailors, machinists, pattern makers. People that in him. I'm short, so everything's got to be tailored. So that all comes at a skill set. So I think, and we need to encourage people to be creative.
Oh, Cyril, I could talk to you for hours. Can we have a big hell yeah for Cyril? Woo! It's been such an honor speaking to you. We've totally run out of time because you're sharing such valuable information. And thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been really just an honor and a privilege chatting to you, as always.
It really has. You're definitely making the fashion industry sexy again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, look at the style, guys.
Can I just add something? Just a last
Please.
point is that, and I always say this at every talk, that if you care about women's rights, if you care about gender-based violence, if you care about poverty alleviation, look no further than the clothes on your back.
I mean, that's so
Amazing.
powerful.
Such a beautiful thing
Thank
to
you
leave
so
on.
much. Thank you, Cyril. Thank you to our guests, our
Thank
live
you.
audience. Thank you, amazing. Thank you to everybody watching at home. It's been our pleasure, and we will see you again soon.
See you soon.
Bye.